So what about your sister, man? Where's she located at?
So Julie is in Knoxville. She's been there for I think 5 or 6 years, and her and her family. So they're loving it there. I don't know if they'll ever move from there.
Okay.
So
How many
she's
kids does
doing
she
great.
have?
Just one. So I just got a niece, and
Okay.
she is a senior this year. So she'll be graduating next year. So yeah,
Wow.
they're
Let's
getting
hope
big.
it's in person. All right,
Yeah.
hey Don, just going to jump right in. We are technically live, so I just want to make sure welcome everybody before we get into the nitty gritty here. But welcome to episode 20 of BenThere. Uh, this is going to be fun today. This is someone who I've literally not talked to until today in almost 30 years. So this is going to be a wild one. But welcome to the show. This is a show about people, specifically those that have grown up overseas. TCKs is the term we kind of relate to. That's third culture kids, those of us that have spent the majority of our lives or a good chunk of our lives living outside of passport countries. It's not always going to be about TCKs, but so far it's pretty much happened that way. But we've also had people on that maybe didn't grow up overseas, but they actually lived overseas for a long period of time, or they're currently living overseas too. So lots to talk about today. Just want to make sure I first of all, I do need to tell you this. I didn't even tell Don this is happening. I don't know if they're watching, but some good friends of mine that I was over in Shanghai with, the Strips, just had a baby boy over the weekend. So I want to make a quick shout out to them and tell them congratulations and welcome to the world. Baxter is the boy's name. So it's just want to give that quick shout out, but let's quickly get into our guest today, which is Mr. Don Blevins Jr. Don't call him Donnie because I was worried he still went by Donnie. That's how I know him, but we'll get to that in just a minute. But Don Blevins was born a military brat in Missouri in 1975. His parents actually met when his dad was stationed in Korea. Don spent his earlier years overseas living in Korea, Malaysia, and Taiwan. Moving back to the United States in ninth grade, he finished high school at Sidney High in Sidney, Ohio. After high school, Don went to college at Bryan College. He's currently an electrical engineering manager at Boeing Defense, and he is living in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Don is raising his 3 teenage daughters, 2 of which are still in high school and the others in college. While his career has taken him to stops in Ohio, Florida, Washington State, California, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, and now Oklahoma, Don admits that he takes great comfort in getting to know the international communities of every place he's ever lived. Growing up overseas, he has been able to share his own stories within those communities, and he takes great pride in still feeling part of a global group. Mr. Don Blevins Jr., how are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. One place I left off on that list here in the United States is I also lived in Kentucky.
In where?
So, Kentucky.
Oh, Kentucky. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a true Southerner, right? No. Welcome to the show, buddy. This is going to be fun. We and I'm serious. Until today, I don't think I've talked to you since you left Taiwan. It's been kind of wild. I mean, this is going to be a treat. So, those of you that are watching, I definitely appreciate it. Feel free to chime in too. We've got, if you have a question for Don while we're doing this, please feel free to go ahead and ask. Just go ahead and type it in, and we'll get to your comments and your questions here in just a little bit. But Don, the way I just read your intro, the way I usually do this is I let you kind of talk about yourself for a minute, so those that are watching get to know you. A lot of people that are watching probably, or at least have crossed paths with you, but maybe they don't know what you've been up to the last 30 years. So I know it's kind of an odd question to start right out of the gate, but if you don't mind, if you can go back 30 years and just kind of give us kind of the Cliff Note version, but what have you been up to, man?
So obviously, raising 3 kids. Right now, you'll see in the background here a bed. So I'm in a hotel. My middle daughter has a golf tournament, so we're camping out here till Monday, 2-day tournament for the Golf Channel. So we're hoping she does well. She's a senior this year. So if I back off 30 years, I moved back to Ohio and, finished out high school there, worked actually a little bit. And if you look at my Facebook, you notice my girls are very big into golf. That was kind of my first pursuit. After that, had my first daughter, and then decided to, okay, I probably need a job that pays a little more. I'm not as talented as my daughters in the sports.
Yeah.
But, worked and went to school and, graduated, kept pursuing engineering as a career. And it's taken me, from consumer products to aircraft, fighter jets, and spaceships. So,
that's it. No big deal. That's it. Yeah.
It's so yeah. Now I'm here in Oklahoma working for Boeing Defense, and it's been pretty good. I mean, that's it. That's the Cliff Notes version.
I like it. What actually ended up with you guys, your family? Obviously, you were overseas for a while, but what got you over there? Was it because you're a military brat technically?
Yeah.
But by the time I met you, because you and I go way back, we met in sixth grade. I moved to Taipei in sixth grade. You were already there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Something with your bio, I didn't even know this. I didn't realize you lived in Malaysia for a while too. So I guess my question to you right out up front here is what got you overseas? Obviously your parents met when your dad was in the military, but after that, what happened? How did you end up in Taipei? How did you end up in Malaysia? All that.
So dad career, I think he ended up working with Lockheed, but through different companies overseas out of the military. First job was to go over to Malaysia. So, from a young child, I just remember going from, living in Korea. I guess we lived in the United States and then headed over to Malaysia. So that's like where I started school. That's where I was at before school. Went through those years till about the third or fourth grade, going to ISKL, International School of Kuala Lumpur, and then moving to Taipei, Taiwan, and going to Taipei American School. So most of my life, I just remember living overseas and then doing the stint as most, I would say, international kids do, is you come back home for, 6 weeks in the summer and turn around and head back over to start school again.
That's what we did. My brother and I, that's exactly, you and I were talking before we went live. That's exactly my story ever since, from the time I was 7 years old till the time I was 17. That's what I knew of the States. It was summer vacation. That's what I knew as an American. So,
Right.
So you spent, so lived in Korea, lived in Malaysia, lived in Taiwan. Then you came back. You've been all over the place with your career. I actually didn't think there was anybody that had lived in more states than me, but I think you got me beat by 3 or 4. So nice job, man. So obviously right out, here we are again. I got to ask the main question that we do on this show. So all those places that you've lived in, where is home? Where's home to you?
It's really hard because, growing up overseas, home is the States. Nobody knows all the states in the United States. Everyone just calls it the States. So they're just like, are you from California, New York? And you're just like, yeah, it's close by, but I would say I'm used to calling America home, but I would say home feels like it's overseas. So it's a tough one. When it comes out of my mouth, I always say the States. Yeah. But when I think about it, I'm like, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Taiwan, that's where I feel comfortable. That's what I remember growing up, especially in those formative years.
Yeah.
All of the, I don't know if I got into more trouble over there or in the States, but
yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get that. So
it's, I was just thinking about it the other day, when we were overseas, I mean, it's totally different when we were kids versus the way it is now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Actually, I don't know if you felt this way too. I mean, looking back, it's been a while, but looking back in a roundabout way and in a weird way, I actually felt more free overseas. Right.
Yeah.
Like we could get away with more. We could do more. There was no limits over there. So it was kind of a wild west, wild east, I should say. But that's kind of how it felt.
It really was. I mean, you would just go there and just act like you couldn't speak Mandarin, and they would just leave you alone.
Yeah. And there are plenty of people that did that and still do that. But yeah, that's funny. That makes me laugh. Especially, I think about 8th grade and just the things we did in 8th grade and walking around and just like you said, playing the part of sorry, timbudong. Like that's all I learned that quote real quick in Chinese. Like I don't understand, even though I understood a little bit. But yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, it's you and I talked about this before we went live, but I'm 6'2" white guy. I'm the epitome of what I'm most people or a lot of people look like in the States, and yet I feel more comfortable overseas in Southeast Asia too. So, I was in Hong Kong. My brother and I were in Hong Kong. My family was in Hong Kong before we went to Taipei. So good chunk of change in terms of growing up adolescent wise and even pre-adolescence. I mean, same thing you were going through. You were in Taipei, it sounds like. I didn't know you lived in Malaysia. That's kind of a cool thing I picked up on with this interview. But yeah, it is weird. It's definitely weird. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say a lot of those, I guess, family friends we still stay in touch with, especially from Malaysia and Taiwan, even though some of them have moved back to the U.S. and some of them have moved to other countries, Australia, even still in Malaysia and Taiwan. So it's nice to have that connection. So you're getting texts at 2 a.m. and you're like, oh, what in the world? You kind of lose sight of the time zones a little bit.
Yeah, no, I completely can relate to that and agree with that. Well, let's talk about that then. Let's go into your TCK life. Let's positives and negatives. I always like to kind of touch base with those. Let's talk. I'm sure you can think back and think of good things that happened while you were overseas and things that maybe you struggled with. But let's talk about the positives and negatives, because you actually, I'm excited to talk about with you. I only know this from, both my parents are Caucasian. We moved overseas as, expats, things like that. But you come from a biracial family, and that's a little bit different story. I mean, it's not significantly different, but it's a major thing that I want to get into in just a bit. But in terms of your own experience, you growing up in Southeast Asia, positives and negatives, what can you talk about in regards to that?
Positives. I mean, it was really good. I think like a lot of the other people have been on the show before. It's easy to kind of come in and get to know people because nobody's sure who's going to show up next year, especially in the expat life. People are just coming and going, doing 1 or 2 year stints, and so you kind of see the familiar faces of people who, this guy's been around for a couple years. But so that was nice. So it was always, you could always find somebody to be a friend with, inside and outside. I would say, since you were a foreigner going to those countries, people are a little more friendly because they were interested in who you were. You looked different. Mm-hmm. And so that was always nice. So it was a little easier to get acclimated to the different countries, different areas. Maybe they just viewed us as tourists and they figured they wanted our money. So, but they were,
there's some truth to that. Yeah, there is truth to that. But yeah, go ahead.
But I would say the downside is, it's a different type of family life. So you're used to building strong connections really quickly versus here in the United States, most people spend 12 years getting to know each other. Yeah. And so that making that transition as we talk about those years, you realize, I guess, how good you did have it living overseas.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I think you get to know maybe not necessarily your neighbors directly, but there are so many people that are so welcoming with open arms when you grow up overseas. And it's kind of like the first experience you get, especially when you get into international schools. And I want to talk about your international school experience here in a minute, but I've been back in the States a couple of years now, and I don't even know my next door neighbors, and that's something that never would have probably taken place overseas. Maybe not directly next door neighbors, but there would always be a welcoming committee. There was always something that people, open arms welcomed you in and welcome to the community type of thing. And that is weird that it's just not something that happens once you come back stateside. So I don't know if you experienced that, but that's kind of my own take right now. So
yeah, it was it was different. They had a lot more I would say, especially in high school, coming back for the first time, it was interesting. I always viewed myself as like the blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid.
Yeah.
Not that I had blonde hair and blue eyes, but you're from the States. So over there, I guess everyone realizes you're not, Chinese or Malaysian or something like that. But then coming back to the United States, that is who you are. And so that's a big difference to kind of get used to.
Absolutely.
And moving back this way. Even though, biracial in, Taiwan or Malaysia was pretty easy in the sense of people just viewed me as an American. So I didn't really understand biracial or that term, or didn't have any experience with it until I moved back to the United States. And then I realized, oh, there is a difference between me and everybody else.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about that. So I'm not trying to cut you off there because that's a couple questions later here in a minute. But what about growing up in the house that you grew up in? Was that something that was talked about when you were in Taipei, when you were in Malaysia? Was that like, were your parents, obviously you have a Korean mom and an American dad. Was that something that was, I can't relate to that, obviously.
Yeah.
So
no, like I had no idea what racism was. Like we never mentioned it. We never talked about it, but the times were different. When we were over there, they were still smoking in the airplanes.
Yeah.
And
yeah, smoking or non-smoking, right? Yeah, that's it. Does it matter? Like, right?
Yeah, exactly. I could, everybody was, smoking and drinking was kind of the thing, was part of the culture and society. It's changed quite a bit since then. At home, I mean, we ate everything. So, I don't know if I really understood that, turkey and stuffing was a really an American Thanksgiving tradition as, hey, this is just, another food group or another ethnic meal that we get to have.
Yeah.
It was good. I mean, I just assumed that everybody's life was like mine.
I can relate to, because I thought everybody did that. Like, I didn't know any different, just like you. I was so young when we moved overseas, but I thought that's what everybody did. I didn't realize for a long time that people actually stayed in the States. I thought that was just kind of the status quo, that you would go somewhere else. And then later on in life, you'd come back, and that's how everybody started their lives. But I didn't know, right? So that's awesome. Let's talk international schools, because you went to a few. Where were you in Korea? How old were you when you were in Korea then? Because you were pretty young, right?
Yeah. So, I see the stories, hear the stories of, my aunt, Emo, what we called her, carrying me on her back. She, I guess she basically raised me while my dad was still in the military. And then from there, we moved to Malaysia. So.
And you went to ISKL?
Yeah.
International School of Kuala Lumpur. Yeah. Do you remember that much?
Yeah, I thought it was great. It was obviously different, but I just, I guess at that age, I just remember playing a lot. And then seeing the mix of kids. I mean, obviously you get more of the Muslim culture in Malaysia versus, I would say more of the Buddhist culture in Taiwan. So that was pretty good. We built a lot of good friends in Malaysia that we actually ended up staying in really good touch with even today. So,
nice.
So it is good. And I told my girls all about, the night markets and stuff, even the ones in Malaysia, going to Singapore. I mean, that was just, 2 or 3 hour drive. So that happened readily. To the point they were just like, when are we going? And going to meet all these people. And I'm just like, I don't know, Now I understand what my parents said when they said tickets were expensive, because I start looking at them up. I'm like, 4 tickets. That is expensive.
Yeah, it adds up quickly. Yeah, definitely. So let's obviously I met you in, I want to say it must have been 1986, because that's the year we moved to Taiwan. But let's talk TAS days. Before we do that, I have to kind of laugh, because ISKL was the one school I played a lot of sports in Taiwan and was lucky enough to go to IASIS, and ISKL is an IASIS school. That's the only one I never got to. So to this day, like I've been to Malaysia, but I've never actually stepped foot on the campus at ISKL. It was the only one. So, but having said that, I met you I'm going to embarrass you for a second. I think you already know it's maybe coming. I got to pull this up on my phone because I think I sent it to you and I sent it to Tim Wanger. I got to see if this shows up right. Those of you that remember the old TYPA days, look at that stud in the catcher's gear. And then the guy to his right, whoever that white, pale, ghosty guy is, that's actually me. But you, Tim, and I were all on the same. My first baseball team at TYPA, the old TYPA, back in the day. But yeah, what about your experiences in Taiwan? Because that is kind of, you're right. It's a totally different culture from KL to Taipei. What do you remember most about TAS?
So, obviously, I was at the old campus. I never made it to the new campus, but I remember, them talking about it and getting ready to start construction. It was good. I didn't realize how much I guess it was kind of a tight-knit group of people, but you kind of saw all the same people going through different grades. So it was interesting. I remember going to gym class, whenever we had gym, I just wore my gym outfit until I got to middle school. And that was like, oh no. I remember my sister correcting me saying, you can't wear that to school. You're in middle school now. You need to bring a change of clothes. And I was like, what? So adolescence was a lot of fun. Watching, my sister being 3 years older than me. So, and her correcting me. And I was just like, going through those formative years of, being an elementary kid into, I guess, somewhat of a young man. So that was a lot of fun going through those transitions and going to the dances and, I guess all of the, what do you call them? Those concerts that they put on where they're like, karaoke, if you will, but,
yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. I remember choir. I think it was in the 6th grade. I can't remember if it was the 6th or 7th grade. And I say that because I really can't sing worth a lick. And so I was in, I guess, sopranos, and I guess I was throwing everybody off, and I had no idea. And the choir teacher, I can't remember his name, went and told a secret to everybody. And he was just like, and this is me in hindsight. He was telling everybody, don't sing, don't sing, don't sing. And when he got to me, he's just like, look, I want you to sing really loud and just kind of and then sing, sing, sing. So when we started and it was time for me to come in, I just started singing really loud and nobody was saying anything. He was just like, okay, you're a baritone. Go over there. Oh, that was like the worst day of my life.
I'm trying to think of who that was. Was it? Oh, because Salmonen was the band guy. I did band. I didn't sing, and it's probably better for everybody involved. Was it Aiden? Does that sound right? Mr. Aiden? Was it? Did he have a beard?
You're asking me to think back now.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I think it was Aiden. Anybody that's watching, the TAS folks that are watching, if you can chime in, feel free to do so. I'm trying to. I never was in choir, so that, again, that's probably a good thing. But
right,
that's pretty funny. Yeah, that's wild. I was gonna say, I remember you and I were in. I guess it was language arts. Remember we had LA/history, social studies.
Oh yeah,
with Mr. McGill. Remember that?
Yeah.
So I still to this day can remember. And when I was teaching, I taught for a long time. But do you remember how we had to memorize that "If" poem?
Oh no,
by Kip. Oh, you don't remember? Because that's like one of my nightmares to this day. Is I got through. Then we had to present it in class.
Mm-hmm.
But we had to present it in class, and I got through like 3/4 of it, and I could, for the life of me, could not remember the last paragraph or the last bit of it. Just embarrassed. And like I remember Anne-Marie Paxton was in that class. You were in that class. I'm trying to think of who else. Wilson Liu. who has been on this. He was in that class, and he sat next to me. And Hans, the South African kid, Hans was in that class. Yeah, I just remember to this day. And it's funny that the older I got, and when I became a teacher myself, I used to, that it used to terrify me, just even the thought of trying to memorize things in poems and whatnot. But sure enough, what do? 25 years later, I made my kids remember that and memorize that. So it was kind of a wild, everything comes kind of full circle. So.
Yeah, I think, my memory of him obviously isn't as fond. I just remember getting in probably the biggest trouble I ever got into.
What'd you do?
So.
Don't worry, nobody's watching. Don't worry about
it. I don't know what I did, but I could not, I just started figuring out that I had some type of, I guess reading disability or something. And I kept bombing all the tests. And he finally, I remember, let the whole classroom out and just sat me down and was just like, what is going on? Do you really not know any of this stuff? And I was just like, I don't know. I was a bad test taker. So then he verbally gave me the whole test, and he took me from like a D to an A. And he was like, okay. But just the fact that, he did that, I was mortified. I was just like, oh man, excuses the class, makes me stay after, and just kind of railed on me for, the next 5 minutes, and then lets me retake the test real quick. And so that's when I realized, okay, I needed help in taking tests. So that's I'm always appreciative of how hard he was on me, because even though I frustrated the crap out of him, he still wanted me to get better and pulled me aside to help me along. So. It was good. I appreciated how much the teachers cared.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And that's, he was one of my, it's funny you just said that, because I thought it was just me. Like I struggle with tests too. And I had, anxiety things and all that, but I just thought it was me. I couldn't understand everybody around me. I thought they were getting perfect straight A pluses, and here I was scraping by with a C, right? So, but I always think of McGill. I always think of that If poem by Rudyard Kipling. And, it's funny to hear that, because I like I said, I always thought it was just me. So I love these stories that come out when we do these shows, because here I was thinking I was the only one, but you and I were pretty much in the same boat. I remember that I never had to stay after, but I do remember when he got pissed. Oh boy, like he was cool and calm, it was great until he got pissed, and then it was just like. I remember he was the first and only teacher I ever saw that actually threw an eraser at somebody. This is back in the whiteboard days, but chalkboard days. But he literally threw it around. I was like, oh boy, okay, I'll pay attention. But 90% of the time he was great, and I actually enjoyed his class. But it's I remember you were in that class, and Wilson was in that class, and it's funny the little things you kind of remember back to. I guess it was 7th grade, right? Yeah, 7th grade. Yeah. So. I don't know I think he maybe left after that year, but I never kept in touch with him. So he'd be an interesting guy to look up and see what he's up to. Friendship wise, you talked about this earlier. You talked about ISKL people who, Taiwan, I'm going to guess, because you were a little bit older, was probably the same, right? Do you still keep in touch with a lot of TAS kids, or, kids, kids, we're all in our 40s now, right? So,
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely Facebook has made it easier. To stay in touch with people. I tried to keep in touch with a few people after I left, but you just kind of get caught up in high school and go into those things. Back in those days, you still had to send letters. So that was never really going to happen.
No.
When Facebook came out, you got to reconnect with a lot of people. So that was, so that's made it nice. I'd say superficially, it seems like I've connected back with everybody, but not like this where we're talking. I'll still talk to Sean every now and then. He'll call me up when something space happens, or just randomly I'll give him a buzz or something. But that's really besides. I don't know if you remember like Niles and Travis Wedge. Their family.
Yeah.
We stay in touch with them pretty pretty regularly. They actually came to my wedding, so that was a lot of fun. And then from Malaysia, just friends and families that we've met over there that we've stayed in touch with. So
that's awesome, and I think that's pretty common. Yeah, same thing. Facebook has just opened up so many doors to reconnect. For all the negative side of Facebook, it's definitely people like you and I. It's definitely allowed us to reconnect with a ton of people that I haven't talked to or even, seen, thought of anything in years. So it's been pretty cool to see that. Even the HK, I was in Hong Kong, like I said before that, but even talking to people that, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, that, you don't really even think of them until their name pops up and they're like, oh, wow, right. So that's been awesome, so to speak, I guess. So let's, what do you miss the most, I guess, about growing up TCK or even just being overseas? What do you miss the most?
I will say the markets.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting because, times are just different now. If you meet a lot of parents, they don't let their kids go out of their house without adult supervision. I mean, I can't remember a time when my parents didn't let me go out of the house. And we were in Taipei, it's like the third grader. They'd be like, here's bus money for a walk.
Yeah.
And I just go hit the streets and go and, take a cab, take a bus. It wasn't a big deal. So that's what I remember and miss the most about living overseas is it seemed, I don't know if it was safer. Maybe we were more naive, didn't have as much TV, but the world was my oyster over there. I mean, my parents were just like, go figure something out and come back for dinner.
I think it's a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
I definitely think we were a lot more naive, but in a weird, twisted way, I do think it was safer. Like same thing. I mean, we moved to Taipei in sixth grade, and I think we were there a month, and I was in a cab by myself. I didn't know where I was going. I just, would show a little card, and the taxi driver would take me, and hopefully it worked out, and it always did. So I totally relate to that. But a little bit different times these days, and even now being overseas, I think it's probably a little bit different too. So I want to kind of get into the acclimation process then, because you came back in ninth grade,
right?
And I want to kind of tie two things together here, because first off, what was the acclimation process like as somebody who spent basically his entire life overseas, and then you came back, you came back to Ohio for ninth grade, and I'm assuming that's when you started high school, right? It wasn't eighth grade, because the reason I say that, some schools ninth grade is considered junior high here in the States, in some places. But was that high school for you, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, so acclimation process, how did that go? Because I obviously never experienced that. I came back after graduation, so
it was interesting. I had cousins and stuff that I visited every summer, and my family back here is awesome. But like we were talking about earlier, it was different because over there I was, I guess, a white American.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how I viewed myself. And then coming back here, I had family that went to the same high school as me. So I just felt like, I don't know, it was going to be something like I saw on TV, the Bill Cosby Show or 90210 or That's what I expected.
I'm laughing because it makes sense in my head. When you say stuff like that, that's exactly how my brain pictured being an American, right? Being back here. So that's why I'm laughing. I'm not laughing at you, which is so clear. Yeah.
But it was, I became the new kid, and I obviously all of a sudden became the Asian kid.
Yeah. And that's actually why I'm asking this question, because the biracial factor too. I mean, the fact you were coming back, from a comfort zone, so to speak, because you've grown up in Asia. And yet that's so ironic that you felt like you said earlier, the blonde hair, blue eye kid when you were in Asia, and then you came back here, and it was kind of totally not only culture shock, but here you are, now you're the Asian kid, right?
Yeah.
So wild. Yeah.
That was interesting. And, and here in the United States, or in the States, people plant roots.
Uh-huh.
And, so lifelong friendships. I mean, you got to kind of break into some of these social cues that, in living overseas, your roots are more broad, like, like a banyan tree or something. So it's spread really far versus, something that's deeply rooted. So trying to figure that out and trying to figure out, I did not understand racism at all. Like, black, white, Asian, like I thought we were all friends. And I quickly realized, oh, that's a thing. Like there was an issue if you hung out with black people, or there was an issue if you hung out with Asian people or Mexican people. You got classified differently, being amongst those circles. So, you had to deal with all those social cues of how do you want to represent yourself in high school.
Yeah.
So that was just new territory that you have to quickly become accustomed to. And then, things like, I guess I didn't understand, like you see them in movies, people saying negative stuff to you, but having to experience it's different,
So how did you acclimate, or who did you latch onto? How did that work?
I found some good friends, and you just learn to deal with, I'm going to say, the jerks or the narrow-minded people.
Yeah.
You get into your scuffles, you learn how to get through those years. But, I'd say it took me a lot longer, looking back on it, to get through them than you would think. Like, even though I had really good friends that I keep in touch with from high school, some of those things they didn't have to experience with me, like people telling me to go back to the country I came from. And I'm just like, dude, I was born here.
Yeah.
My parents have, owned land here since I was born. So yeah, just having to deal with those emotions and not understanding how to vent about it, because, at the end of the day, I'm still the biracial one, because here in the US, I'm obviously here with my dad's side of the family where they're all white. My mom is 100% Korean. So she has this community to go talk to, where if I go to the Korean community, I'm the biracial kid.
Yeah.
So there are things that I will never be able to, there are things that I can't do because I'm biracial. And there are things here in the US that I can't do because I'm biracial. So there's like this, trying to find this home was something I had to work with. And I think that's probably a big reason why I moved around a lot.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. What about when you were back overseas? Do you remember, obviously biracial, the aspect of that, did you feel it when you were over there? Or was it primarily you felt more white kid American? Is that?
Yeah. Everyone assumed I was American over there. Like,
So,
I never had anybody. I mean, you can obviously tell I'm mixed.
Yeah.
They just classified me as a white American.
Yeah, that's so wild. I never had to go through that. So it's ironic that here we are in the land of the free, and that we're supposed to be open arms. You actually, you felt more comfortable. It didn't have to deal with those things overseas, right?
So yeah, I guess my parents filled out my paperwork, but the first time I had to fill out an application, I didn't know how to fill out the race part.
What'd you put?
Well, I would say for the first part, I always put white.
Okay.
And then they were just like, well, you can mark multiple. And then I was just like, well, then you feel this guilt because you're like, oh, my mom's Korean.
Yeah.
And she kept her Korean passport. I mean, for a long time, even after I graduated high school, she was still a full Korean citizen. And so then I started marking both. And then I was just like, this is really bad. But depending on what the job circumstance was, I'd be like, it'd be better if I was Asian on this, applying for this job.
Yeah.
Or it would be better if I'm white if I'm applying for this job. So I guess that's the one benefit I was able to take advantage
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's true. It's not like you were lying, so it is what it is. So it's yeah,
Right.
that's wild, man. That's something I obviously never had to experience. You know, that's why I love these talks. I get to see different perspectives, and wow, the acclimation process for me was what I struggled with the most. I've openly said this on the show, but I can't even imagine like what you went through. Right. So what about your sister? I mean, I don't necessarily want you to
Oh,
speak for her, but how did that, because she came back her senior year, right? So
you
how did
know,
that go down?
I'm sure it was worse for her than it was me.
Mm-hmm.
And in this manner, I would say, looking back on it, I think if you spend as much time as we did overseas, it would have been
Mm-hmm.
nice to finish and then come back for
Yeah,
college
that's
and
tough.
transition.
Yeah.
Um, but I think she probably, we've talked a little bit about it, but she probably struggled even more than I did because she only had 1 year to get acclimated, where I had 4 years to kind of work my way through this system. And then she was thrown into college and those things. So,
Do you think she faced the same things you went through? I mean, did you guys, I don't know if you just
um,
said you talked about it a little bit, but in terms of the racism and you're not really from here, but you're from here. Did she feel that? I mean, I hate asking you to speak for her, but at the same time, I mean,
um,
she's your sister, so you
well,
probably
yeah, I know, she definitely felt it was harder to get plugged into different
hmm
friend groups.
yeah.
Um, I think she, at least my perspective of my older sister,
hmm
I would say she went from being one of the most popular people to, okay, she's trying to figure out how to get into a new friend group, and
Yeah.
maybe it's not as strong as it was when it was um, in Taiwan. So definitely more difficult just in, I think, a social class status. I don't know about, I mean, I have my perspective. I always think it's easier for the girls, especially if they're pretty. You know,
Yeah.
everybody likes them, doesn't matter. But yeah, and like I said, I think her transition was a little shorter. So I think she got to play that new kid card a little longer.
Yeah. Yeah. That works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What a tough thing. I can't even fathom. I mean, I struggled enough in college, much less I can't even think about coming back just for a senior year, especially when you've been overseas so long, like you just talked about. So,
Yeah. It's,
wow.
yeah, I used to think, like, she had the option of staying, it was on the table, and my parents were like, no way are we going to leave you overseas for a year.
Yeah.
And at the time I was like, oh yeah, that was a smart decision. Um, you know, of course I was thinking, if I have to come back, why, she should come back too.
Yeah.
But, 20 years later, 30 years later, I'm like, oh, that might have been really actually pretty good for her, just to keep her over there for her last
Yeah.
year, and
Yeah.
let her finish out the school year.
Well, tell her I said hello. Either way, man,
Oh yeah.
that's wild. So we'll come back to that in just a second. But real quickly, what's now that you've been through? I mean, you've been through everything. But what advice for families, especially because obviously you're not the only one, but those that are acclimating back stateside or back to their passport country that might happen to be biracial. That's something we haven't talked a ton about on this show. But I mean, just because the people that I've had on aren't necessarily biracial, but what kind of advice would you give to the families, like your sister's situation or even your situation? Those that spent
Oh
significant
man.
chunks of their life overseas, and then you just back in the day, even just when I went to college, there was no template on how you're supposed to do this. It was like, thanks for your time overseas. Good luck.
Right.
They didn't really tell you what to expect or what you were about to get into. But especially being biracial, how if you could give some advice to those families that are coming back to their passport country, what would you tell them?
That's really tough. I tell you to stay.
Stay. I like
Uh,
that. Yeah.
it's depending on how you got to be in an overseas position. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you spent, you know, all elementary and then went to middle school and came back, I think that's a different transition than if you were overseas your whole life and come back.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if there's an easy way to do that, unless you know dependent upon really just what you look like and what country you're going back to. Very much everything is based on your look. So, I guess no one's ever asked me how I could help somebody moving back, but
we go for the big questions here, the deep questions here.
Yeah. I don't know what I would tell you, to be honest, just because it was something that I don't know how to prepare for. Because they're kids. I mean, and kids can be mean. I mean, it doesn't matter how much you prep for it. It's different experiencing it. And at the high school level, I think everybody's kind of testing the boundaries of
totally.
everything. And I think that's good, especially in those areas, kind of see what those boundaries are. But maybe just prep them in the fact that, hey, you might go through some really difficult confrontations, and how to react to it. I didn't say anything, but sometimes I think, oh, maybe I should have said something.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been the difference of, I don't even know what, I don't know if I would need to change schools, but maybe having that conversation would allow me to react or behave differently than I did. So, just dropping those worst type situations, especially for a biracial person coming to, America, which predominantly is either, depending on where you're at, Mexican, black, or white. I mean, those are kind of your three demographics, depending on how far south you go, to a little further north, to all the way up north. Just realizing what the racial culture is and saying, hey, this is probably what's going to happen at some point when you get back there.
Well, I think go ahead.
It's just so you're not caught off guard.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exactly what I'm getting at, because I, like, back in the day, I don't even know. It's gotten a little bit better, I would like to think, having worked at an international school. And I know that sometimes, a lot of the counselors now are prepping seniors that are going back to their passport country for the transition process, for the acclimation process. There was none of that back in the day.
Right.
When we were, and I can't even imagine. I mean, I struggled and I looked the part. I'm not biracial, obviously. And I just, the fact that you just said what you said, I mean, the conversation, having those, having that dialogue, that's a start. I think that definitely, whether you realize it or not, you probably just helped out a ton of families that are about to go through that same exact experience. So there's never a set template for, growing up the way we did and coming back to wherever you're coming back to. But I just think, it's not necessarily a fault. I just don't think it's, especially our time period, it just wasn't an open conversation. So I think having that conversation, getting that conversation started, that in and of itself is going to be beneficial to a lot of families. So I appreciate that answer, and I respect that. So, so, how about the travel itch? Do you still have it? You're a guy that grew up like I did. I mean, do you still have that travel itch?
Well, I think I couldn't obviously scratch it internationally as much. So I spent my time just floating around the United States.
Yeah.
And
if you could, would you though? I mean, there's still places you want to get to in Asia. Would you go? When's the last time you were back?
I haven't been back to Asia. I spent most of traveling internationally. Well, I guess India is Asia. So India and Europe really has sought after here, especially here in the last few years, positions that would give me the opportunity to potentially go back overseas. It's like we were talking about at the beginning of the program, definitely it's different. I guess it feels more like home, even though this is home. Like, all my family's here. What I'd really love to do is take all my family here in the United States and just move them overseas.
Yeah.
And then I'd be happy.
Yeah. To Korea? Where would you go?
I definitely feel more comfortable in Asia, especially like when I went to India, like when I went to Europe, I loved it there. It was beautiful. The people were great. Um, and I could see, living there for a long time. But I guess inside, since I grew up in Southeast Asia, that just feels like, oh, that's home.
Yeah.
And so I'm torn. I want to retire in the Mediterranean. I got to go to Turkey one year, and I was just like, oh, I love this place.
Yeah.
I want to go to like Italy or Greece or Spain and retire there. But, as much as I say that, home is like Taiwan and Malaysia. But I haven't been back in 20 years. So I might go back there and be like, what in the world is this place?
Yeah. No, that's interesting you said that. I've been to Europe a couple times since Taiwan days, and I always felt I loved it, just like you.
Yeah.
I mean, Ireland and, Italy. I've been to Italy a couple times, but I always felt like a tourist there. But when I get to Asia, when I get to Hong Kong, Taipei, Shanghai, you're right. It's a different mindset. I don't know if it's just because of how we were raised, but it is. I don't feel like a tourist there. I feel like it's home, right? So it's interesting. But yeah, there's parts of Europe I could easily buy a little bungalow and call it good. That definitely, I agree with you totally. But yeah, there's something about, maybe it's because we were so young when we were exposed to it, but it's just, I don't feel like a stranger or a tourist in Asia, even today, even though it's been a while. So it's such a wild trip, right? So.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it makes it really hard because, you're trying to find your place.
Yeah.
And, my girls, I've talked so much about it that they've been like, when are we going to get to go?
You beat me to one of my questions, but keep going. Go ahead.
They have, have pushed to say, hey, I want to go have that experience myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't been able to pull that off just yet, but it might be an opportunity in the future. Maybe not in the context of how I did it, living, going to school, but maybe they can come visit if I'm able to, pull something off and go work internationally for a long period of time.
Yeah, no, you already know what I'm going to say. I hope you get to, because that's I'm a little biased though. So let's talk real quickly before we transition into what you're doing now in life. For Don Blevins Jr. these days, but let's talk TCK stereotypes. Whether they were a known thing back in the day or not, we tend to all kind of, those of us that grew up the way we did, kind of, follow these same patterns. I mean, at least I do. I know that a lot of people that have been on the show would agree to this. I want your take on this. I mean, the three main ones are that we have commitment issues. Would you say that's fair? In general, broad, very broad. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know about commitment issues as much as I can't. If you want me to stay put, that might be an issue.
Because commitment can mean a lot of things. Relationships, it can mean, in terms of where you're living and having that itch to move somewhere else or be constantly on the go. It can be a lot of things.
Right.
But yeah, go ahead.
So what's the second? Yeah, definitely some phase of commitment issues. I think people-wise, always want to stay in touch with somebody. Always feel like, hey, I could, once you're my friend forever. But sitting in one spot for very long is really tough. Yeah.
What's the longest you've ever lived somewhere?
Alabama, I think. Well, that might not. I want to say we went to Alabama, working at NASA there for like 3 years, 4 years, and then I moved to Tennessee, and then I moved back. So I don't count the move to Tennessee like 10 years. So my girls think Alabama is home. That's where their formative years were. That's where they were at, and so that's kind of the longest. Everywhere else was like, 2-3 years, and then something would come up, and I'd be like, well, I would blame it on something. We were in California for a while, and then we're like, oh, we want to be closer to family, so that was, hey, wonderful, we can move back east. and get back that way. But technically, that was a move.
No, I get it. I get that itch. It was always like a 3-year thing for me. Yep. At the end of that 3 years, it was like, oh, something's up. Something intrinsically, it was like, it's time to go.
Yeah. So when we moved to Oklahoma, my girls were like, "Are we going to get a house here?" I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "Do we want to get a house here?" And they're like, "Well, what are you thinking?" I was just like, "I think I'd rather buy a vacation home overseas." Yeah. So they were just like, "Okay, that sounds good," So I think I've moved enough where I'm like, okay, I don't know where to put my roots in unless I just do it wherever my parents are. And right now they're in Alabama, so
I get that. That's why I'm in Utah right now. Obviously, you and I talked beforehand. Yeah, my mom's here, and Emily, my wife's, her parents are here. So for right now, yeah, it might not be forever. I definitely have an itch, and my itch is probably stronger than my wife's, but it's just the way we were raised. So I get it.
Right.
What about the chameleon ability? We're people that have seen so much and done so much, and yet we don't really have homes, and yet we're able to blend in anywhere. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. So it's been really definitely yes. Just in meeting with, obviously here in the United States, have a great bond with what's going on here because my dad's side of the family. I can understand, what it's like coming from the hills of West Virginia, which is where he kind of grew up. Ohio, and then because we live so much internationally, blending into those communities and saying, hey, yeah, I've been to Malaysia and Singapore and, India, and Taiwan, and all these different places. So can kind of tag into those communities. And even with, being biracial, understanding like the Spanish and Black communities because of some of the they talk about. I can go into those communities and say, hey, hey, I have an understanding of what that is you're going through, and being able to build upon there.
Oh, I love that. And you're right. Totally. You can blend in anywhere. I think that's one of the biggest perks and blessings that comes along with being a TCK. Whether you realize it at the time or not, I do think that's definitely a benefit that we all kind of go through. What about just the fact that we tend to be more easygoing? I think so, but again, I'm biased, so yeah.
It is. Yeah. Everybody says, why, you're always in a good mood, and you always think everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I didn't really realize that until, they actually started telling me that. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, I just think we're so programmed to adapt, and we're so programmed to. We've seen so many things. It's not a better or worse thing. I know you're probably the same way as I am. I don't think of myself as better or worse. It's just we've seen so many different situations, and we've learned how to transition through them. That at the end of the day, it always ends up okay. Like you just said, it's not always easy, but at the end of the day, it always kind of, things kind of work themselves out. And I think we learned that at such a young age. There were language barriers. There were, just culture barriers. There were so many things that we overcame so early that you just, what's another thing, right? So that's kind of how I view it anyway. So
yeah, you learn how to take a taxi and just go that way.
Yeah, you learn to speak enough Chinese or speak enough of the language. I call it taxi Chinese. That's what I speak still. You find the basics, but yeah, you're right. It's just not. There's bigger fish to fry, man. There's just once you've been in another country, you didn't speak the language, and you were 10 years old, and you were sitting in a cab, and you weren't scared. What are we doing for dinner that night, or what's are we going to be able to make this show? That's all irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Like there's so many bigger things out there that we've overcome and been able to get through. That these days life is what it is, and you just kind of take a breath and move on. So. Right. That's my take. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm just that's always been my take. There's definitely deep things that happen, but
I will say too, something that while we're talking about this, that was really different in moving back to the United States and living overseas. Is, especially in Southeast Asia, where the dollar value was so much more. Was we had a maid, we had a driver, we didn't to help around the house, and it wasn't because we were really well off. It was just it was so affordable.
Yeah.
And then coming back here and realizing, oh, we have to do all that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I can remember, kind of graduating. They're just like, well, what do you want to do? I'm just like, hey, factory work sounds fun. I
Yeah.
That was what you saw in the movies,
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I mean, and that's the thing when you US wise, that's all I can relate to. But yeah, if you sit here and say you have a driver or a maid or things like that, you're spoiled rotten here. You're super wealthy. You've got all. It wasn't. You're right. I mean, even when I was in Shanghai a couple of years ago, I had IEs. That's the same thing as like AMAs and things like that. They were termed different, but everybody did. It wasn't that I was a super wealthy special guy. I mean, it wasn't that expensive, and she would come twice a week and iron my shirts and tidy up the house. But it wasn't. That's just the way it was. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary over there. So it's coming back to the States. If you were, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I do miss it.
Yeah, I miss my shirts being ironed. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. So yeah.
It's So that is a big transition too.
Yeah.
You tend to not realize, especially if you just grew up over there. You come back over here and it's like a novelty. It's like, oh, I get to iron my shirt. This is kind of neat. It gets old really quick, but
Totally. Well, listen, we're about an hour in, just over. The way I like to do these in two parts. We just kind of talk TCKs for an hour, and I love it. I could keep talking about that forever. But I want to transition into Don Blevins Jr. these days. What he's up to these days. And you went to college at Bryan College. That's in Ohio, I'm assuming.
It's in Tennessee.
Tennessee. Okay, I should have done my homework there. Yeah. What did you study? What did you study when you were at Bryan?
So I got a business degree, and and really, I had been doing engineering work for a long time. Took a lot of like engineering coursework and got a job at General Electric. My first, I guess, real job, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
And as a designer, and realized very quickly that, hey, I want to do business and travel and kind of go into that side of industry. It just didn't happen. So it basically got my degree. I was still working, but by that time I had so much experience in engineering that they just said, nope, this is what you need to do. So I stayed in engineering, and I mean, if you ask me what I could do, I'd be like, I've learned to love it. It's really interesting to get into the analysis of different materials and figuring things out with different loads and dynamics of components. But I still think I have an itch of, hey, I think I could do more of the business side of things and travel the world, maybe as a second career or something.
Yeah, why not? Right? Why not? So you went to Bryan, and then you married young, you had kids young, you started work pretty quick, and then you started moving a ton, which is not uncommon for us TCKs. You spent most of your I guess uprooting here in the States. You weren't overseas. But with your TCK background, did that make it easier to continue to move? Was it more of a second nature type of thing, or was it at that itch that we talked about?
Yeah, it did. I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, oh, let's go. Like, even my parents would be like, do you know how difficult it is to move?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, really?
Yeah.
Pack your stuff up and go.
Well, it's all we knew, right? That's all we knew. So, yeah.
So I really didn't think it was that hard and I still maybe have a tainted view of it where I'm just like, oh, just put it in a box and move it.
Yeah.
So it definitely helped in traveling into all the different locations. I think it's also helped me in my career as I've, been able to take that experience and life lessons from being living overseas and working in these different industries. I mean, you start to realize that, especially in the engineering field in the U.S., there are a lot of Asians, there's a lot of Indians, there's a lot of Americans, and to walk into a situation either to get engineering work done and understanding the broken English, depending on what culture you're talking to, makes a huge difference. I can remember early on in my career, talking to a guy from Taiwan, and English was awful, but I knew everything he was saying and I could answer the question correctly. And talking to people from India or, even Europe, it made it a lot easier to hear the English through their thick accents. It definitely helped living overseas, even for my career today, and it helped me get a lot of the jobs that I got.
I love that. That's a great answer. When did you hitch up with Boeing then? How long have you been with Boeing?
So I've been there for about 5 years. They tried to recruit me for much earlier than that, but I have this bit where I just like to finish a project. So I was working with NASA. I finished my project and I said, you want me to work the next space project for you guys? You need to bring me on in a couple weeks. So, they worked a package for me and I went out there and started working.
That's pretty impressive, man. That's I had no idea. Like, sorry, my eyes, you're always my the catcher that I threw to in playing Little League. So, so that's impressive, and I admire what all you've done. What about in terms of the family life and all that? Were your kids pretty open to moving so many times, or how were they acclimating to all the transitions that way?
Well, I will say the toughest transition was definitely Alabama to Oklahoma. Part of that was, divorce, and then having to move again. So, they had lived so much of their life in Alabama that that U.S. mentality of, hey, I got school, I got friends, I got a community but at the same time, I think they have this itch of wanting to move, and it's definitely probably my fault for them to have that because they're just like, okay, I'm ready to move, let's go. And even when we've been here in Oklahoma, for Boeing, I work on the defense side, but I work on a United Kingdom program, and there's an opportunity that, hey, I might have to go over there and work for 4 or 5 years, and they were just like, I hope it happens before we graduate.
So they live with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So cool. 2 in high school live with me. One's obviously, she's an adult in college. So
yeah, she's at Bryan as well, right? You and I talked about that. So which transitions into, we got to talk about this, man, because I coached golf for a couple of years. I've coached a lot of things, but golf. Well, no, don't get too excited because first off, I'm a horrible golfer, and second off, there was only so much I could do because I have so much of a baseball swing in me still. So, but you are still a golfer, and your girls, you get to brag a little bit for now. You're definitely a girl dad or dad girl, whatever that term is right now. But let's talk about your girls, because all 3 of them, not just 1 or 2, it's all 3 of them are pretty proficient and highly skilled golfers. I mean, right now you're in Kansas at a pretty high tournament for, is it your middle daughter? Is that what you said?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So how did that all come about? How did the golfing thing, was it from you? Was it just them reaching out, or talk about that for a little
while? I would say golfing obviously they wanted to play all types of sports. And I was thinking, hey, at first I was thinking golf, or not golf, but soccer. That's kind of a bigger sport here. I realized early on that my girls probably would never be tall enough to play basketball, even though I think that's their favorite sport.
Okay.
And I let that run that course, but very quickly, once you get into like 6th, 7th grade, the tall people start getting tall, and and they realize that, hey, this isn't going to go very well. But they still like playing basketball. None of them liked softball or soccer. They were just like, okay, Dad, what is up with all this running and chasing the ball? So we just started playing golf, and I already knew that they were going to do something. It's just like, you're going to have to pick a sport, and that's just life. I'm your parent, and you're my kid. So, and golf became it. And so I would, people ask me all the time, they're like, hey, how do you get your kids involved in golf? It's kind of one of the most boring sports to go out there and practice. And I said, we didn't practice. I took them to the driving range and bought them ice cream and candy bars, Gatorades.
Wise man. Yeah. Wise man. Yeah.
So that became a very good place to hang out. And then while you're hanging out, you go hit, 5 or 6 balls. Like, I would just waste money on a basket of balls. And I never pushed them to hit more balls than they really wanted to. So once their attention span left, we left. Until they got older, and no matter what sport you play, you get to the point where you need to practice and drill. Mm-hmm. And it does get kind of boring, if you will. But there's a purpose to it, so you can play really well. And so that's how, they transitioned into golf amongst the other sports.
Where does the competitive side come from? Is that from you?
No, I would say I'm probably, like, they hate to be on my team. So I love coaching and teaching, but I'm that parent who, I want everyone to be involved, and I'll lose on purpose. And my girls are just like, if where's the team? I'm not on Dad's team, because he's going to throw it to the one person you're not supposed to throw the ball to, and he's going to miss the final shot. But I didn't mind losing. Their competitiveness, I would say, comes more from their mom's side.
Okay.
She's very competitive, but it's been good. I mean, they've seen a good balance between that.
Oh, it's impressive. It's not just, like I said, it's not just one or two, it's all three. So do they compete within themselves? I mean, do they have pretty good relationships? Or are they competitive with each other? How does...
So it's funny, like my oldest daughter, she actually quit golf her junior year.
Oh, wow.
And part of her senior, she was just like, Dad, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done grinding. I'm done exercising. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. What do you want to do? So we just, she would just work out with us, fitness wise. And then we started going around looking at colleges, and she was just like, Dad, this is really expensive. And I was just like, yeah, go figure. She's like, do you think I can still get a golf scholarship? And I was just like, well, you haven't played a tournament in over a year. She went out and she played some great rounds of golf and got, 2 or 3 offers and settled on at Bryan. So that's how, she got into, full ride scholarship to play golf.
Wow. That's impressive. I don't care what sport. That's impressive, man. Full ride. Yeah.
Yep.
Well done.
It's Haley. So she's not competitive. I tell that story because she's just like, man, she's going to be your drinking buddy on the golf course. And
I like it. Yeah.
Haley does want to beat you, even if she smiles.
Is she the middle one? Haley's the middle?
Okay. Yes. Okay. She's a grinder, 8 hours a day. Everybody knows who she is. She's on the golf course. She's practicing.
Yeah.
That's what she wants to do. She wants to go pro, and she puts in the work to do it. She's gotten, she's already set for college, multiple offers. And
oh, wow.
It's, but her goal is just like, hey, Dad, can I turn pro before I go? Just like, well,
really?
I don't know. So
I like I admire the ambition. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So it's fun to watch. It's fun to see her work hard, and, she's had great success, and, it's golf. Only one person can win. So sometimes it gets disappointing. But it will be interesting. Like we're at this tournament here for the Golf Channel, one person gets through. There's like all these qualifiers around the country, and she's fortunate enough to be able to play in it and be in a position to win. So it's a lot of fun.
What about your youngest? She's
oh yeah, she's a sleeper. So everybody's just like, oh, she's a little cute baby, and but when I get her to myself, she's just like, all right, Dad, what can I do? Because I really want to beat all of them.
I wondered about that. Yeah, that's awesome.
So we definitely go out and train and work. So she, but they're definitely all self-motivated, and they go about it differently, which has really been interesting. Haley practices as soon as she gets out of bed. She's either hitting the gym or hitting the course. Livy is like, I don't want to see you leave. I don't want you to see me leave, but I'm going to sneak out when nobody's looking and become really good. So, but yeah, they all do well at it. They enjoy it. It's nice to see them have a passion for something.
Yeah.
So it makes it easy for me to help push them along.
Well, no, it sounds like you're doing well in the father side of things, man. So just keep doing what you're doing. Because the 2 years, like I said, I've coached a long time, but it was mainly baseball and a little bit of basketball. But the 2 years I spent coaching golf, those were, long nights. I'd stay awake trying to figure out how to it's a tricky game because it's not just one thing or two things. It's not just a little fix of this thing or that. It's you versus the course. It's you versus yourself. It's such a mental game, So yes. I admire that. That's such a tough thing. I mean, it's So anybody who's good at golf, you've got my respect because it's not an easy, and nothing about it's easy, right? So I'm the guy, and probably I don't know. I mean, you're definitely better than I am, but I'm the guy that if I can hit it far and hit it straight, then my putting's off. If my putting's working, then my drives are all over the place. I just don't play enough, and I think that's half the battle. But that said, it's such a mind trippy game. But yeah, if you can conquer golf, man, you've got my respect. So that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, let's. Hey, your sister just chimed in. Let's see if she. There you go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
There you go. Let's talk about a little bit more about your girls. And so we kind of hinted at this earlier. So they've never been overseas. They've never gone to Korea. Or what's the story there?
No, they haven't. And a lot of it was just me getting caught up in work and trying to get career focused. But they've been over to Europe a couple times.
By the way, that wasn't a knock. I didn't mean that as a knock. I just wondered if they'd been over. Yeah, don't take that wrong. I just didn't know if they'd been overseas. So.
It's no, but they definitely wanted to. They've all wanted to go. Haley said for her senior trip, she was like, just send me to Korea.
Nice.
And she's just like, you're just not allowed to come with me. Senior trip.
Yeah, there you go.
So I was like, okay, if that's what you want to do, I mean, that'd be fun. I would love it. My mom's side of the family's still all over there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's I think they would enjoy it a lot, especially how they've kind of embraced as much as they can here in the U.S. of that culture.
Yeah. What's their take on the blended cultures, their Asian roots, the bicultural lifestyle, I guess? I mean, are they pretty connected with how you struggle when you came back, but you see where I'm going with this. It's just what's their take on that blended culture?
It's different. So, they just look different than I do. So they've really been able to embrace it. They took Korean lessons, and I would say in some ways speak it better than I do. And, they've learned how to cook in, Korean dishes. Mm-hmm. They love going to the Asian markets. And it's been fun for them to introduce their friends into this different culture. I think, the world is just different at this age. So it's almost, it's almost kind of cool, if you will, to have that, to be a part of their, I guess, personal space, if you will, where, I don't know, it's just different. I mean, the world is so different today than it was.
Is that one of your daughters right there?
Oh yeah.
There you go. Hey Haley, what's up? Yeah.
Yeah, she's the reason we're up here this week. And
Okay.
it's so if she can make it past this one, I'll let you all know, and hopefully watch her on TV.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, that's awesome. But is it their culture side of it? Was it? I hate the term push, but is it something that they welcomed with open arms? I mean, I can't imagine growing up here in the States, blended culture and all that. I mean, was it something that kind of shied away from, or was it something they've always been pretty open to? And I'm sure your mom is a big part of that too. But is it something that's been easier, maybe that transition or that acceptance of it? How does that work?
Well, having only gone to school in the U.S., I think, they build those relationships from a young age. Yeah. So it's different from that standpoint. I will say that, we've always fed them Korean food and Asian food, so they're definitely not picky eaters at all. Yeah. The only thing they didn't embrace was taking Korean lessons. Okay. I was just like, we're going to Korean school. Yeah. And they're just like, that sounds so cool. We're going to learn a different language. And then when you're sitting in classes, you're learning how to write and read. And then they were just like, after week 2, they're like, no, I do not want to learn how to speak Korean, write Korean. I was just like, you're going to do it.
Yeah. How fluent are you? Are you pretty fluent?
Oh, no. I think if I was immersed in it for a month, I'd pick it back up because it was my first language. Okay. It's what I learned, what I started with. Yeah. But I can understand it pretty well. I just can't regurgitate it.
That's how I am with Mandarin. I've been around it my entire life. I mean, even in Hong Kong with that Cantonese, but there was a little bit of Mandarin. But I still, going back to Shanghai, it's the more you're immersed in it and the more you're around it, you start to really, it comes real quick, comes back real quick. So yeah, I was in Shanghai all of a couple months and it was like boom, boom, boom. So, but here, now that I've been back to stateside, there's just not a whole lot of Mandarin in Utah, right? So,
yeah.
So you I can still understand it if I hear it, but it's, having to rethink and all that stuff, it's a whole different ballgame. So
that they have taken to the Korean dramas. We probably watched them all.
Okay. Really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
It's the youngest one has snuck in a few Mandarin dramas in there. So really interesting. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's cool though, that they're eager to go back, that they're eager to go see that side of the family and side of the culture too. I mean, that's not always the case, just from what I've seen, in dealing with kids, like I said, being in education for 18 years, you see all kinds of kids from all kinds of backgrounds and cultures, and some wanted nothing to do with that. Some that had just come over and they just wanted to be American. They almost wanted to distance themselves. And so it's actually cool to hear that, your kids especially, which is a product of you and product of your own feelings towards it. But I think it's a cool thing that they're eager to go and eager to want to see that side of things too. So,
yeah, it is really good. And I'm thankful in a way too, just because, it's nice to, I guess, mix and be able to, be a little more dynamic as an individual for them.
Yeah, I applaud that. I definitely applaud that. So do you think you'll stick around in Oklahoma for a while, or what's the long-term plan, or is there a long-term plan? It's always such a loaded question when I talk to TCKs. Right. I say that speaking as a TCK, but yeah, what's the long-term plan right now?
Oklahoma really shocked me. I mean, I liked it. I came out here to, do some work a little bit. Got to come out here and visit the town before we moved. But it's really one of the most beautiful places I've ever been.
Really?
Yeah.
Pretty flat though, right? Yeah.
But there's something to just like looking out and just never seeing it ending. And you see the skyline just go on forever, the ground go on forever, the clouds are just, everywhere. It's like an armada of spaceships up in the sky. So, it's different. I will say, and I don't know if you've been this way. Mm-hmm. I always find something I love about everywhere I go. Yeah. So when people ask me how long can you stay, I'm just like, oh man, I think I could stay here forever. Yeah. But ask me in 3 years.
Yeah. I was just gonna say it's kind of a metaphor for life, because I love that you were saying like it just goes on forever. It's just, and yet at the same time, something else might pop up, right? So it's just, and you can blend with that, which I
Right.
totally get too. So yeah, it's such, that's why I said it's such a loaded question when I say, are you there long term as a TCK? Because that's just kind of ingrained in our DNA. That it's good right now, it works right now, and it's a gorgeous place. And Oklahoma is a gorgeous place. I've been there multiple times. But the one thing I also wanted to make sure we talked about too, with you and I discussing this, not necessarily before we went live, but just in general, I think it's really cool that you blend yourself into the international communities of every place you've ever been. And you kind of talked about that, through your bio, things like that. But that's big for you. Why is that so important for you to kind of get yourself out there and talk about or get into those communities?
Definitely it feels, I guess it's that homey feeling. Like, I don't know why, but, I can hang out with whoever and have a drink with anybody out there. But, I guess I just get drawn to that Asian side of things because that's how I grew up. So I don't think there's really been an area where I didn't, like, almost my first friends were someone from Asia, and listening to that, broken English, and getting, good food, from somewhere, from the best, where's the best Chinese restaurant? Where's the best, Thai food, or, is there any Hong Kong food here? You kind of find those pockets, and I don't, I definitely, at least I don't think I was seeking it out, but I end up there every single time, every place I've ever gone to. We've had people come over to our house and show us how to make dumplings, and, gone and, had people make us dinner. It's interesting. And they're so inviting and welcoming.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest reason. I think in Oklahoma, I've been invited to someone's apartment from Mexico and Vietnam, and only been here for about 6 months. I have not been invited to one American.
Really? Yeah. What's that? Your extended family, no matter what, right?
Right.
Within those communities, I still feel it. It's and with those welcoming with open arms. I love it. Is there significant Asian? I guess I've been to Oklahoma. I've driven through it. I've stayed there a couple of nights. I've been there on business trips. Is there a significant Asian community there, especially where you are? You're in Oklahoma City, right?
Not as big as I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
Right now we go down to Dallas if we want.
Okay.
If we need something, which is huge. They have a Koreatown, so which obviously suits my taste buds very well.
Yeah.
And but I mean, we have an Asian town here, but it's probably, people would laugh at it if you were from California or a big city.
Yeah. But it is kind of cool that no matter where you're at, there's always some taste of home, right? There's always some feel of home. So that's awesome. So your parents, they're where now?
They're in Alabama.
Alabama still. Okay. Good. Yep. Doing well? So, retired, I'm assuming, or how's that?
So they're retired now. They're doing good. Dad has cancer, but it's actually going very well.
Okay.
So I think, they'll be around for a long time. So yeah.
Mom's doing okay?
Yeah, she's doing really good. They found, it's interesting, they both attend a Korean church.
Okay.
And we'll go with them, and the experience is different because you always have a meal after church. So it's always just like, what church you go into, it's just like, well, how hungry are we going to be after church? So yeah, it's it's nice to see them get plugged in and have a larger community than just
that's cool. That's needed. It's definitely needed. Yeah. Does your I mean, obviously with COVID issues and whatnot, but does your mom get back to Korea much, or do they both go back, or how does that? Are they?
Part of the reason we haven't gone is there was a kick for them they wanted to come over here and visit.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this earlier, when we were kids, everybody wanted to come to the United States and find a job and become a citizen and all of that. But here in the last, I don't know, 5 years, it's really, they just want to come here to vacation. And we ask them, hey, you want to come stay? We can probably, work something out somehow. And they're just like, nope. I want to stay in Korea. I want to stay in China. Even in, Southeast Asia, Thailand, they're just like, I'd rather live here and just come visit you. So, and I think that speaks volumes for what's going on around the world.
Oh, absolutely. I was just going to say that. Yeah, that's wild. Because you're 100% right. I mean, when we were growing up, it was always get to the States, get to America. I mean, I remember being in taxis, driving around as a kid in Taipei, and taxi drivers would ask me where I was from, and they want to get there someday. Their whole goal was to get to the U.S. It was just so wild to think that now. But yeah, it's almost like a reverse situation. But yeah, different times indeed. Different. It's a weird world right now. But that said, I still you just tell me when, and I'd hop on a plane even right now and head back to Southeast Asia. I love it there. So it's home.
Oh, yeah.
It's home. So. Well, listen, man, we made it to the end. We have the three questions I always ask towards the end, and hopefully you've maybe had time to think about some of these. But let's talk about the first one. Is always something that people maybe don't know about you. What is something that even I mean, I've known you a long time, don't know you well anymore. But what is something that people don't know about Don Blevins Jr.?
Well, maybe if you talked about me a little bit. I would say, I guess professionally, some interesting things. Have stuff on the space station. That's always kind of fun.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's not normal. Yeah.
And then I've traveled around a lot. I mean, even within the U.S., I think, like you were saying, having lived in so many states has actually been nice to live in places long enough to get to know it.
Yeah.
And see if you actually like that area or that part of it.
Well, that's the thing. You not only have you lived in a lot of states, you've lived in different parts of the country. You've been on the West Coast. You've been in the the heartland. You've been everywhere, the South. So you've definitely seen. Your eyes are pretty open to what's out there. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually people kind of attach themselves to one area or one space, but you've seen it pretty much all. Have you been on the East Coast? I'm trying to think. Did you say?
I guess if you count Florida, but
okay.
Obviously, that's as close to the coast as I've gotten, but traveled up to the Northeast, vacations and business trips and stuff.
Gotcha. But you never lived there, right? Never lived in the East Coast? Okay. Well, what about this one's always kind of fun, but if you could, you had an hour to sit and chat with anybody about anything, who would it be and why? It could be a living person. It could be someone who's no longer with us, but if there's just an hour to sit and chat about anything, who would it be?
Man, there's probably two people that I would pick, and it's really because I had such a strong attachment to my grandmothers on my, my Harmony on my Korea side, and my grandma on my American side is my grandfathers, who I never got to meet. So if I can branch it out to two, I would love to have met them and seen the kind of man they were because of how my grandmother and my dad and my mom influenced me.
That's a great answer. It's so funny that I've asked that question so many times, and it usually comes back to grandparents. Yeah. Whether it's parents that are no longer around or grandparents, it's always that's the second one. So I totally get that. My paternal grandpa, I was 8 when he passed on, and it sounds like we had a lot in common. Same thing. I'd love to pick his brain and kind of hear his stories. He was a D-Day guy. He was a Korean War veteran, actually. And so I would have loved to have gotten to know him a lot better. So I respect that totally. So, all right. And then the last one, let's say you have don't worry about COVID. Don't worry about anything else. But let's say you have a free airplane ticket to anywhere in the world right now. Where would you head and why?
Oh man. I'll tell you, I'm torn between like Greece and one of the islands off Thailand, just because they're so beautiful, and I love the water. But I would have to say, since I've been to Southeast Asia in those areas, I would pick Greece because I've never made it there. Yeah. And it's one of those, I don't know if I'm fantasizing about it or it's as amazing. It's as amazing a place as I've dreamt up. So,
I don't. You can't go wrong with either choice there. And I haven't been to Greece either. That was on the list. Well, it was between Italy and Greece when my wife and I went on our honeymoon. So yeah, we ended up in Italy. But same thing. It's places I haven't been. Yeah, it's so easy to fall back. It's not a bad thing to fall back into wanting to go to Southeast Asia. But I'm with you. It's the more the better. I want to see everything. So that's why I asked that question. I'm just curious what everybody else says. So, well, listen, man, we made it. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say I'm interested if everybody always picks an international place.
Yeah.
Do they?
Especially, yeah. I've yet to. I don't think I've had anybody say anywhere here in the States yet. So especially with the TCKs that I've talked to. So yeah, the funny thing is that doesn't surprise me because I think we're just like I said, the DNA, that part of us is always like, get on a plane. Like I'm the kind of person, I don't know if you are, but like the second I'm usually asleep on a plane. I feel so comfortable on a plane. And I'm usually sound asleep before we're even in the air. I'm that guy. Yeah, I'm that guy. So, and I feel completely calm and relaxed, and I get better sleep in hotels. I think it's just the way. It's such a weird thing to say and admit, but it's just the way I grew up. It's the way we grew up, right? So, hey, look, yeah. So it's look, man, this has been fantastic. We've come to the end of this, and I can't thank you enough for doing this. Before we go though, Haley, right? Did I get it right? Yep. Good luck. Get it done. We all expect to be watching you on tour one of these days. So keep doing what you're doing. That's fantastic. But and with your dad, nothing but best of thoughts to him.
Yeah.
So just I'm sure he's going to be fine. So tell your family I said hi. Your sister chimed in earlier. That's great to see her name up there too. But thank you so much for doing this, buddy. It's been a blast, and I'm so impressed with what you're doing in so many different aspects. So this is great to kind of touch base. And man, we've both come a long way since our TYPA days. So that's kind of a fun thing to look at. When I look at that picture, I thought that I came across that picture just accidentally, to be honest with you. And I had to share it with you. I had to share it with Tim. But yeah, the 1986 TYPA Royals. That's how right. I remember you. Yeah. Oh, hold on.
I still have that trophy.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. I gotta put this up here real quick because this is actually a mom of one of my former players, but she wanted to chime in real quick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. Great family, great people. I always loved it when she was in charge of we go on a long bus trip and she was always in charge of the food and she'd always send Asian food. And I was like, yes, thank you. This is awesome. So no, Teresa, thank you for chiming in. Definitely. Yeah. So, but yeah, man, look, hey, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I'm proud of what you're doing, man. Keep doing what you're doing. You've obviously done well and you're continuing to do well and you're raising 3 daughters that seem to be well on their way to a great life and all that too. So, but definitely say hi to your parents, say hi to your sister, keep doing what you're doing. And just thank you for doing the show, man. This is why I'm doing this. It's just so cool to kind of get in touch with guys and ladies that I haven't talked to in years. But yeah, man, keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing. Okay. But those of you that are watching, I'm going to kind of sign off here, but thanks for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you click that little button that says subscribe. The rest of you just enjoy. And we're going to do this again next week. We've got a pretty big name next week, which I've kind of kept it, not to belittle Don Blevins Jr.'s name. That's a big name too. No. No, I didn't mean it that way, but we've got one. We'll know in a couple days. I'll put it out there in a couple days. But Don, I'm so glad. First off, I almost called you Donnie. That's why I was like, I'm so glad you wrote last night. And I was just like, is it Don now? Is it Donnie? Because I know you as Donnie Blevins. Yes. But this has been fun, man. So just stay healthy and stay humble and keep doing what you're doing, budy. And I appreciate you doing this. Yeah, stick around. I'm gonna end the broadcast here in just a second, but stick around. And but again, the rest of you watching, this has been BenThere episode 20. Crazy to think we've done 20 of these. Thank you for watching, and until next Sunday, y'all take care and just stay humble and be good to everybody. We'll talk to you later. Cheers.